All right. Today we are going to be building Pong from the ground up. Now, does everyone know what Pong is before we get started?
Did you say Pong?
Pong, yeah. So we can actually start with a little history lesson about a couple of things because we're going to be building Pong in vanilla JavaScript, right? So Pong is considered to be one of the first video games. In terms of it, like the original version of it was, I think, developed in on a research machine in the 1950s. It was the first commercially successful video game when Atari ripped it off of Magnavox, which had ripped it off of something in the 1950s. And so it is, I think, if we're going to be building a video game, a pretty good place to get started, considering it was one of the first ones. You might think, oh, that means it's one of the most rudimentary. I choose to think that it means that we had the most human experience building up to that point versus any other video game. So it's a very simple game, right? You have two paddles. It's a two-player game, and you move each paddle up and down as the ball bounces around the field. And if it gets past you, it's a score for the opponent, right? So then it would be like, it's going to look something like this, right? Now, we're going to be using HTML5's Canvas feature. Now, a little bit of backstory on HTML5 and HTML5 Canvas. If you grew up around the same time I did, you will be familiar with, the internet has always been an awful place, but in the early 2000s, the internet was specifically a different kind of awful place. This is about the time when Microsoft had beat out Netscape Navigator, so it dominated Internet Explorer dominated browsers. And during that time, there was very little investment in building browsers, right? So Microsoft had pulled most of its people off of the Internet Explorer team. You ended up in a situation where basically after a while, it was pop-ups were everywhere. You would constantly be accidentally downloading software. And one of the things that you would accidentally download quite a bit is viruses when you were trying to update Adobe Flash, which at this point was the best thing for animations in games, right? If this is familiar to you, if I'm bringing back traumatic memories, I'm sorry. But basically, in 2008, in the late 00s, it was kind of decided, hey, maybe we should make the internet not an awful place to be. And part of that was Mozilla Firefox came around, Chrome came around, Internet Explorer started losing some of its appeal, and then basically, we started ending up in a situation where more pop-ups were being blocked, people were getting less viruses, and there was still this Adobe Flash thing around that was still, even if you were a brilliant hacker genius, if you got a pop-up that said, hey, your Adobe Flash needs to be updated, it was really hard to tell whether that was legit or not. So at the same time, HTML5 had come around, which had been built to kind of make the internet a little bit more interactive, more do a lot of the multimedia stuff that Flash had done. And eventually in 2012, Steve Jobs was finally we're not packaging Adobe Flash with Macs because the security flaws are just too intense, just use HTML5. And then 2014 came around, there were some updates, and we are basically going to be using Canvas from HTML5, which is going to be doing a lot to replace those sorts of old Flash technology and do some animations for us. Now, one thing I do want to caveat in advance, HTML Canvas does live on the DOM. It does interact with JavaScript. That's what it's meant to do. It does not use a lot of the DOM elements that you are familiar with. So it doesn't use divs and things like that, and often. And one thing that I do want to flag is we're going to be teaching you how to use it to build a game. It's super good for games and cool animations. It also never developed over the years, we've developed some really good accessibility tools for pretty much the rest of the internet. Canvas doesn't have those. So rely on it for games, rely on it for a couple of things. Don't rely on it to really make a flashy animated site. So while I teach you this, cool? All right, I'm going to get started. Now, I said that we were building Pong, and I meant it. So here we have a folder with a list of to-dos. And that's how we're going to be starting with Pong. Cool? So the first thing I'm going to do is just touch index.html. Right? We're familiar with this at this point, and I'm going to ask VS Code to give us some boilerplate. I'm going to call it Pong. Touch is to make a file. mkdir is going to be to make a folder. Touch is to make a file. And then I'm going to say hello world right here. First thing I'm going to do is save it. Then I'm going to open it in my browser. Cool? And we have hello world. First step to Pong. Great. Second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to really quickly, I'm going to actually give us some JavaScript. So I'm going to make directory source touch source.index.js. And then I'm going to add this little script tag right here. And then we're going to do source/index.js. And let's defer it. Cool. So I'm going to really quickly check to see that that worked. Hello world. Great. Could have used the shortcut there. Let's refresh. There we go. Hello world. First two steps. We have a website. It's running JavaScript. Cool? So the next thing I'm going to do is I warned you that there was going to be HTML canvas. So I'm going to just grab HTML canvas. So we've got this W3 Schools right here. And it describes a couple of things that I do want to emphasize. It's to draw graphics on the fly via scripting, and a canvas element is only a container for graphics. So if you find yourself coding and you are deleting your canvas and like redeveloping your canvas, you're probably doing something a little bit wrong. Keep the canvas as the container, draw everything inside the canvas. Cool? There might be a situation where you do that. And as I mentioned, it is like a newer technology than, say, CSS, which would be a much more interesting but like probably longer lab to see if we could build Pong in CSS. But basically, it is a very it's like an early tool, and so like there are a bunch of things that you might like end up having to do if you get really into Canvas. Like if you want to rotate an image, the actual way you do it in Canvas is to rotate the canvas, take a screenshot, put the canvas back where it is before the user sees it, and then keep reusing the canvas. But we're not going to have to deal with that right now. I'm just going to copy this code exactly because we don't have that much time. Cool. Instead of this hello world, I'm going to have our little Pong. Great. This right here is a box. We will probably want a bigger box, but this is the first step to building Pong. We have a little canvas element right here. This is where our game will go. Cool. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab it. And then we got, is it my canvas? Let's see. Sweet. Trust but verify. There we go. And we're going to call this canvas equals. And then the next thing I'm going to just do is the canvas.width equals 1000 canvas. Come on. Cool. This looks like a good start. Now, one thing that I'm going to just start doing right now, that if you're, what's up?
What are the units of measurement?
Those are pixels. Now, really quickly, one thing that I have learned from building a few JavaScript games at this point is when I'm assigning numbers right here, I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit. When I'm assigning any numbers, like usually that's a sign that I'm doing something that I might want to configure and like change a little bit later. Like if I'm like giving something a speed, I'm probably going to at one point end up adjusting it, and it's going to be really hard if I'm going to be like command Fing for 1000, right? So what I always start with is something that I just call config, or whatever. And then I'm just going to call this canvas width equals 1000, canvas, Pojo. Cool, I got chill. Canvas height 800, and then let's just do this here. Great. We now still have a box. That's what we want, right? So the next step is, what's up?
How do you determine where the canvas
The canvas, sorry?
starts?
The canvas will start, as in terms of like, on the DOM.
Yeah.
So it's just an HTML element, so whatever container you put it in, you can style it to like center it or whatever. Is that, but if you're talking about like where on the canvas you're talking about?
No, you can't. So you can't specify where the canvas starts.
As in?
Outside of, like you can't say start at 100 pixels.
Well, so you could always move this 100 pixels to the left, right? So I could do like, grab this right here, and I can just be like, 100, right?
Oh.
It's just an HTML element, right?
Yeah.
So I can do whatever I want with that. That'll take place out like in its style. But yeah, just treat it like you would any other box. But then once you're inside the canvas, different things start happening. This is where the magic happens. What you're rendering onto the canvas is going to be different from how you render it onto the DOM. You're not going to be calling margin on things inside your canvas. Instead, we're going to be using a thing called context, which I'll get to. But basically, the first thing I want to do is we have two paddles, right? And ideally, we want to render them. Now, paddles are rectangles to me. So I'm just going to be like HTML canvas draw rectangle. Cool. We have this bad boy right here. Let's just go HTML canvas draw. I feel like that's a little bit more friendly to all of us. So yeah, find, create, drawing, draw on it. Great, so I'm just gonna copy this code, right? And then we can talk through it. But basically, what we're doing right here is we are creating a rectangle. The fill style is going to be the color for the rectangle, and fill rectangle means a filled rectangle. And I'm going to alt tab really quickly so that we can see in the documentation. There's a fill rectangle takes 4 arguments. It's just telling us this: x, y, width, and height. Yeah? So this is going to be our paddle, right? And let's just test to make sure this works on the DOM. And then I will probably get rid of that var, replace it with a const or something. But boom, this right here is a gorgeous paddle. We all agree this is exactly what we want. Yeah, we can make this ideally like 10, 80, put it 100, make it look, convince ourselves that this will eventually be the paddle we want. And that looks more like a Pong paddle, you know? But as I said earlier, we're going to be doing some config. So I'm going to be like paddle width, I'm going to call it 10 pixels, paddle height 80 pixels. Cool? And config, paddle width, config, paddle height. What's that?
What is the context again?
I'll get into that right now. Cool. So let's console log this real quick. And then I will explain it. So it's called canvas rendering context. And if you look at it, I'm not sure if everyone can see this. It basically has a list of methods and a list of has a list of like just values that are really helpful right now. So it inherits from canvas rendering context 2D, and you'll see a whole lot of things here: arc, clear rectangle, things like that. So basically, what I like to think of context is if you ever worked in Photoshop, or if you're more powerful and you worked in Microsoft Paint, Like you had like a bunch of tools, right? You had like you could click on it and you could grab a paintbrush and you could be like, I want this paintbrush to be red, and you start drawing in your MS Paint. Or you could be like, hey, I want to like draw a box. So you'd click the draw a box thing, and then you'd be like, I want this. Like my paintbrush is now red, right? I like to think of context a little bit like that. Basically, what context does for you is it's just like, hey, I'm working on this variable that just describes my tool set, and then I'm going to call things with it. So so like right now, what I'm walking through this code exactly, I'm specifying, hey, I'm getting the context from Canvas, I'm getting its 2D stuff. Like we're working in 2D right here. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set it so that like my current paintbrush is red, FF0000 red. And then I'm going to be like, hey, context, with your current settings, fill a rectangle for me with these parameters. Now, if I were to then do something like this right here, I'm just going to make a second one. I'm going to put it at 200. Now I've got two paddles, right? And all I did here was I just was like, hey, now that you're done running that, like go on to the next part of go on to the next part of your code, right? And now your context fill style is green. Now, after you've done that, draw something in green for me, right? So basically, you set up your paintbrush, and then you use it to like draw the thing that you want to draw. Cool? Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
So ideally, you only need to call context once in your code. I'm going to be calling it twice, spoiler alert, because I'm lazy. But I could call it once. But yeah, go ahead.
Because of the second rectangle that you're gonna have two different cans.
No, so context is just your paintbrush, right?
That's what I'm
Yeah.
doing, two paintbrushes for two of the rectangles for
No,
another thing.
just imagine like
No.
what I'm
just
doing.
asking
Yeah,
why.
yeah.
Because
yeah.
it is the same one.
Totally. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to be like, hey, context. I'm going to dip it in the rectangle, right? And then I'm going to fill a rectangle. And then the next line of code after that is I'm washing this out, getting green paint this time, and then my paintbrush is still working, and then I just draw another rectangle, right? So that's, yeah. Does that answer your question? You sure?
I got it.
It really is just your tool set. Go ahead.
So is this the only way to add stuff to the canvas? You have to call the context?
It's the way that we're going to be doing it. Yeah. I'm like trying to think of other ways, but like context is going to be like the way that you draw most of it, like render most things to the DOM.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because you can't just like add another element to canvas.
Yeah, don't add divs to canvas. At that point, you're probably like you can have like or at least you can like use a canvas for a background or something like that, or for animations or something like that, and you can start putting divs on top of it. But you're not going to be like whatever like your animation is or your game is. Don't be throwing divs in it. Cool. Now, so I'm like right here. We have something that looks like a paddle, and at this point, I'm just like looking ahead at my code, and there's each paddle that I'm going to be drawing is going to have a lot of behaviors, a lot of functions that it's going to need to be able to call. It's going to have both of them are going to be holding a little bit of state, a little like some values, like their x and y coordinates. And so at this point, I think this is a really good like place to put a class. I'm going to create a class called paddle. So right now we have this script, right? I'm just going to add a new script. I'm just going to call it paddle.js. Honestly, I don't need to defer it because I'm not like it's only going to be called by my index.js, right? So when my index.js loads, it'll ideally be at that point we'll have already waited for the DOM to load. So I don't need to defer it or anything. And I'm going to quickly touch paddle.js. Cool. So class paddle. Constructor And then I'm just going to have something that I'm going to call render. All right, let's make this real. I'm going to have render equals blah, blah, blah. And I'm just going to copy this right here. Now I'm going to like pull these side by side. If that gets annoying, we can stop. But basically the first thing I'm going to just do right here is I'm going to just be like blip, 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 blip. Cool. And now instead of doing all this, I'm going to just be like, wondering if we can just, blip, blip. Let's pass through canvas just in case I do weird things to it. I'm going to call this canvas. Cool. I'm going to call this new paddle. I'm going to call this paddle 1. I'm just going to pass in canvas. Cool. Now, ideally, at this point, if I do paddle1.render, this should do something for me. Context is not defined. Come on. Yeah, because I didn't define what's up?
I think he might have his backwards.
Oh, right here.
instructor.
Nope, there we go.
Okay, never mind.
But you're right. You absolutely right. Cool. Yep, so we still have this little bad boy right here. Now we need to make it work though, right? Or I'm actually going to, at this point, work a little bit more on getting 2 paddles, okay? So, so in order to do that, it's wild that this has access to, cool, it has access to config, that's hilarious. I'm just going to console log config here to make sure, because I am now paranoid. Great. Cool. So, at this point, I am going to start thinking about what I want to do with my my app in general. And what I'm noticing immediately is there's 2 paddles, right? And I'm also noticing that these paddles are going to have slightly different behaviors, right? One is going to be rendered on the right side. One is going to be rendered on the left side. One is going to be bouncing the ball to the right. One is going to be bouncing the ball to the left. Yeah?
Yeah.
So at this point, I kind of want to initialize them with something something different to like tell them what they're going to tell my code that they're going to be doing different things. And so at this point, I'm noticing that this is going to be launching X, or this is going to be launching the X of the ball in a positive direction. I'm going to call this 1. I'm going to call this one -1 because it's going to be launched in the negative direction. I just feel like that's going to be some helpful tool for later. So at this point, I'm going to be like, hey, renvert. I'm actually going to just delete this, yellow. Let's call this canvas. Let's see what happens. And then I am going to call this direction. Cool. And then this dot direction equals direction. Great. 1. Great, let's see if this works. Great. So for this, I now want to get rid of this 0 and 100 and replace it with a variable that I can control. Say one that is initialized and that is carried to this. That's helpful for me. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to say that this dot x, right, equals, and I always kind of want to start in the middle. So at this point, I'm going to just say, this dot y first. I'm going to say that this starts at config.canvas height over 2. Now, one thing to note really quickly about how Canvas works, and I'm going to just draw this out here, and also I'm going to be writing a whole lot of stuff when I'm building things. So just because like this gets confusing. First off, the 0, 0 is up here. If you render something at 0, 0, this is where it's going to be. This right here is canvas width. And then 0. This here, canvas width. Canvas height. And this right here is 0, canvas. This might seem a little like over the top now. As we get into like actually making the ball hit the paddle, writing down everything is going to save you a lot of time and make you feel less insane with your code. So I'm actually noticing right away that canvas height, like if it starts here, if I put it in the middle, it's actually going to start a little bit below the middle. So I'm going to actually just subtract config.paddle over 2, right? And let's see if that works. Oh wait. 0. This dot y. Great. This will work. Now, one thing to note is because is I'm now going to need to render 2 of them, and they're going to end up both on top of each other. You can't really see anything. But at this point, I now have to define a this.x that is conditional depending on whether it's on the left side or the right side. And you'll notice that if it's on the right side, I can't just say 0. If it's on the left side, I can definitely say 0. If it's on the right side, I'm doing canvas width minus the width of the paddle, right? Because it's going to be rendering from this corner. That one was clearly broken. Cool. So this.x. Let's do this. Direction equals 1. Then this.x equals 0. Is everyone familiar with the ternary operator? Cool. This.x equals config.canvas width minus config.paddle width. Everyone see what I'm doing there?
No, where did the direction come from?
Sorry?
Initialize with the direction.
Here, I'll show you in a sec. Right here, when I said new paddle 1, new paddle -1, I then created this constructor. Think of initialize from Ruby.
I see it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Cool. Are we all comfortable with like how we got here to this point?
Wait, can you review that again?
Which part specifically?
How you got the other paddle to show up?
Yeah. So I just created another paddle right here. Like so, there's 2 paddles, calling the render functions.
But then with the ternary operator?
Sure. So they both have a this.x that they're rendered with, right? So right here, like this is going to be dependent on. I said, hey, if I give you a direction of 1, set this.x equal to 0, left-hand side of the board. Otherwise, let's set equal to canvas width minus the paddle width, right? So, no worries. And if at this point, we're going to be like describing like weird spatial relations. If you're confused, like let me know now, and we can totally dig into it because it's going to get a little bit weirder.
What's the paddle width?
The paddle width.
Yeah, where that one come from?
Right here. So I have these config variables that define how I'm going to be, like how my app is going to be doing stuff. Cool. So we now have 2 paddles, right? They don't do anything. They're not helpful. This isn't even animated. This is a singular frame, right? But it's there. So at this point, let's start actually doing some animation, prove that we can. So first, I'm going to like just write this into a into a full render function right here. And we have this thing called request animation frame. And this is what's going to basically be animating our app. So I just want to like call this really quickly. So it is a method that tells your browser you wish to perform an animation, and then basically paints the screen for you. And then it takes in one callback that describes how the screen is painted. And the important note here is that in your callback, you have to request the animation frame to do the next frame. So basically, we're going to call it once. We're going to start calling this render function. Once it is executing, it's just going to render it again. Does that make sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
I'll show you how it works. So we're going to start with this. We'll just copy it. What's up?
This is what Raph is talking about in that blog post, this version,
Sweet.
right?
Well then, yep. So then this is going to hopefully be a little familiar, but I'm just going to then copy this right here. And I want to prove that to myself that it is rendering. So I'm just going to be like console log, am I rendering? And you see this number going up right there? It's a good indicator that it's rendering, considering it's been like console logging hundreds of times. Cool? So it's just repainting the page. I haven't made it do anything different, but if I want to make it go like, if I made this thing called like move, paddle, or move down, and then I were to be like, hey, paddle one.move down, right here, it's just going to start moving. Now, this points out another thing right here. You're noticing it's not clearing the previous render before it's starting again, right? So our paddle is just like painting its way down the page like a slug. It looks weird. It looks confusing. It's not what we want. So now the next thing that I'm going to need to know how to do is clear context canvas, or clear canvas rather. There we go. This will work. Cool. I'm just going to copy this in its entirety. I'm going to be like, yo, right here. And I'm going to rename context to whatever. This is my first time using context here. Here we go. Great. What? What's up? I don't need one in the other one. I do. Yeah, like I bet I could totally write right here and then not have to worry about it at all. I just want to, let's get this done. Boop, boop. Let's call this const 2. Did I accidentally make this a global variable and is it acting weirder than, nope, I don't think it did. I did. That's awesome. Nope, there we go, cool. Great. So the paddle is moving down. Now it's moving down every time I render. This isn't awesome for me. This isn't what I want. It's also moving down too slowly for intense gaming. So there's going to be a couple of things I'm going to need to do. First, I'm going to make it faster. So I'm going to be like this y plus equals config dot paddle speed. And then I'm going to just call this yeah? Cool. It's going to go way faster. Boom. Yeah, that's some real Pong right there. Yeah? Cool. So we now have a function that will do this. If I want to like test a move up function too. Now, what? Save. Cool. So one thing I'm going to call out here, I actually don't like having my render function also be the function I call to animate, because that's not a separation of concerns I want. So I'm just going to like really quickly render. And I'm just going to move this down here. Great. Should ideally still work unless I broke something. Classic. Yep. What's up?
You have an extra I for constant animation.
That makes a lot of sense. Boom. There we go. What's up?
Why is on the code? Why is on the code on in VS Code? Why is request animation frame called at 29 and 32?
So this is the initial frame, right? Basically, you could totally just do this.
Which one's the initial frame?
I think we can actually just do this. Basically, I need to animate for the first time, right? Because this is recursively animating itself. So this actually works. I can just do this. But basically,
Oh, you're calling it.
yeah. So at the end of every request animation frame function, if you want to animate, you have to call that callback again with another request animation frame. This is basically, it's what it says it is. It's requesting the next frame. It's like, hey, I finished doing all the stuff I need to do. Can I have the next frame now? And that's what it's doing for you. So at this.
I didn't realize that 32 was calling 27.
Great. So at this point, I want moving up and down to be controlled by the user, and this is you're going to have to follow me here. I want to spoil this for you before I write a lot of code. One thing about tracking key down on JavaScript is that we'll only track the last key pressed. So if you have two people pressing keys at the same time, the last key will be the one registering. So it won't register a key up until the first person picks up their key, but it makes it impossible for you to do a two-person game unless you do what I'm about to show you. Basically, I'm going to start right here. I'm going to have document.add event listener, key down, handle, key down. And I'm just going to be like console log this thing.e.keycode. I will show you in 1 sec. Let's stop this. Right now, if you watch my console, I'm pressing W. I'm pressing S. I'm pressing up. I'm pressing down. What keycode is it's the number that we've assigned each key, that JavaScript has assigned each key. So when you're doing a key down, I'm not going to be like, hey, key down W. I'm going to be like the key down 87, right? And that's going to refer to it, right? So if I did this right here, true. Now I'm going to press up, false. Cool. If you do key code in JavaScript, this little thing is your best friend. F, G, H, J, K, just all the way down the home row, right there. That's how JavaScript does keys. Cool. So at this point, I want to make it so that I can keep track of all the keys that have been pressed down, and then change it when those keys come up, right? Because key down is an event, a key up is an event, and it's only going to be tracking the most recent event for me. So I'm going to be creating something right here that I'm going to call controller. And this is going to take the keys of the keys. Let's do boop, boop, boop. And what I'm going to be doing here, really quickly, is I'm going to be giving it two things. I'm going to be giving it a function to run if it's active, and I'm going to be tracking to see if it's active. So I'm going to need two things right here. Pressed, false, func, and then let's just go with I'm going to be like, let's actually, so this is W. I'm going to be like pedal 1 dot move up. And then let's just copy these. Now, at this point, I'm imagining some people are like, okay, I'm still kind of confused about where this is going. You are right that this doesn't do anything right now. What I want to do is I want to have it so that as soon as key down fires, this switches to, like, on W, this switches to true. As soon as it pops up, this switches to false. And I want to do this for each of them. And I also want to create a function that just goes through the controller, looks at every single one that's true, and run that function. So basically I'm going to have something here that I will call like, run press buttons. And just going to go through each key and do something with it. Which that something is going to be the function. And I will code that out in a second. Does everyone kind of see where I'm going with this though? Do people at least kind of understand the problem that I'm trying to solve here? No? Cool. I realize it's overwhelming right now. We'll get there. So here is, and for context, this was something that I stared at for hours in my Mod 3 project. So I'm trying to show it to you now, but this is like a pain in the ass that we're solving for right now, and probably one of the most logistically difficult parts of these. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be like, hey, or controller dot, or I'm going to be like, hey, controller, do you have e.keycode? If so, can you please set its pressed value to true? So is everyone kind of familiar with this syntax that I'm using right here? Have people seen this before? This is called short circuiting right here. The and will resolve to false if the first value is false, or if it's true, it will resolve the second value. And doesn't return, like and doesn't return a true or false. It returns false or the second method. So I'm just being like, hey, do you have this? Cool, then run this.
So if this is true, execute second.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
And I'm going to then test that this is true. Maybe like, let's quickly just console log controller dot 87 dot pressed, or right, it's a number. Great, let's get back to our canvas. It's been a while, we missed that. Cool, when I tap it, it starts being true. It doesn't turn false again because I haven't written that yet. I'm going to just copy this right here. What's up?
Is it just like a ternary without an else statement?
Basically, yeah. If you're writing a ternary where like the alternative is like else null, think about short circuiting. It's another very friendly thing to do. Great. I'm going to call this key up. And now it should tell me, hey, is W true? Yeah, I'm holding W down. Now I'm going to let go of it. It's false again, right? And so I'm just tracking all my buttons that are being pressed down. And I'm going to now press both W and up at once. I think up is 38. Cool. This is a little bit harder to track, but it is happening. I can make them both true. I can make them both false. I can make one of them true, the other false. And console logs inside of your animate are always going to be a pain in the ass. So now we've got this bad boy. We have to write a method that makes it so that we run anything that's true, right? So I'm going to write what I call this? Run press buttons. Now, there's a method that you can call called object.keys, and then you can pass in an object, and I'm going to show you what it does. Great. Let's take a look. Cool. So when you call object.keys and then that object, it's just going to feed me, it's going to give me the keys as an array, right? Just being like, hey, object, give me all your keys as an array. So now that I have this, I can iterate over them, right? So I'm going to now quickly do that for each. You ready for this? Key. And then I'm going to do controller key dot pressed and and hopefully this works. Dot func. Execute it. If it's pressed, run its function. Let's take a look. I might have screwed this one up. Nope. Here we go. Now these are working. Cool. Questions? I realize this is a confusing piece of code right here. Yeah, let's start with Solomon.
Where's the funk?
Where is the funk?
Yeah.
All through this app. But if you want it, it's right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I've defined this controller as a key of each key that we're pressing its code. I've created two values for it. Pressed, check if it's true or false, and then if that runs, a function to be run on it. Does that make sense? Otha, you got a question?
I just want to say that this is so
Thank
beautiful.
you.
That like 36 to 40 is just like, oh, chef's kiss.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
All right. Cool. So we now have paddles that move. Let's actually go back to our to-dos, which I promised that we would use. Make paddles move. We don't have make paddles move only to the end. We can do that now. We can say, hey, our paddle should only be able to move up until if this dot y is greater than 0 or is less than 0. Or we can just do it. I promise you short circuiting. And this dot y equals 0. So hopefully this works. I don't know. No. What? Oh, classic. I think it's a function, just because I didn't put a semicolon or something. Cool. There we go. There we go. And still move to the bottom and then off the screen. Yep. And so we can just do the same thing here, but with a little bit more. This dot y plus this dot plus config dot paddle height. If this dot y plus config dot paddle height is the bottom of the paddle. Cool? If that is greater than, let's add a semicolon to make this, is greater than canvas dot height. Then let's make this way better. Really should learn to write things on 2 lines. Then this dot y equals, and let's go with canvas height minus paddle height. Yep. Great. Nope. Paddle is right. Where did I say paddle? Did I lie to myself? Okay, here we go. Unexpected end of input. Okay. Yep, that sounds about right. You kind of need a close bracket every now and then.
Yeah. There we go. Yep.
Yep, there we go. Cool. Our paddle is now fully operational. It doesn't bounce anything, but that's because there's nothing to bounce. So let's add a ball. How are we doing? Cool. Canvas, draw, circle. Yeah? Yay. I'm just going to continue to ruthlessly copy. Cool, let's just copy all of this. I'm just going to call it right here. You can call this paintball equals this bad boy right here. And we're probably going to need to rename context. And then everything else here looks like it should just work if we plug it into our code. It'll probably make a ball that's too big, but nope. Right, because we need a classic. This is another thing we have to render, so paintball. Cool. This is our ball. It's a little big, I think, for Pong purposes. But it's a ball. And I'm going to just, now that we're tracking something else, I'm not going to make this an object. We could. Or I'm not going to make this a class. I'm just going to make it a plain old JavaScript object. So let's just call this const ball. I'm sorry. When you have enough dogs in your life, you start calling everything ball, having silly words for ball. R. Let's call this 8. X. Let's call this canvas width over 2. Sounds like a good enough name for it. Canvas height over 2. And let's just call this, where you got this? Now, if I were to not be programming this really, really quickly, we could potentially put this in a different file or something like that. But YOLO. Great. This is a small ball. This looks like a Pong ball. We can use this. Now, at this point, I'm just noticing it's not going to be in the center of the screen forever, ideally, if I'm good at writing Pong. It's going to want to move around, right? And then at the end, I want to reset it back to the center. So I'm just going to do that right now. I'm going to make reset ball into a function. I'm just going to say ball.x equals this bad boy. I can type sometimes. Great. Cool. This still works, but now I have a little function to at the end of the game. I can just reset the ball back to the middle. Now that we want to make the ball move, right? At that point, I'm going to need something that just tracks the speed at which it's moving. I'm going to, because I'm a nerd, call it ball.dx equals equals config.ballx speed, which I'll start at 5. And then I'm just going to do the same thing with y. I'm calling it dx to mean the derivative of x. It just means the change in x, right? If you're writing a function, if you're writing a game, you'll usually be tracking its position, maybe the change in position, and then maybe the change in the change of position, the arc. If you're going the change in the change in the change in position, you've written some weird game code, and you could probably make it better. But basically, for this one, it's only going to be traveling in straight lines. These are the things we need. Boop, boop. Great. And now I need to make the ball move, right? So let's do const move ball. Oh, I should probably refactor this a little bit. This is all garbage. They're nerdy variables with var. And I appreciate them giving me the code, but var, come on. What is this? Great. So now we've got this, right? Move ball. And I'm just going to make it ball.x plus equals ball.dx. Ball.y plus equals ball.dy. And then let's just move ball. There we go. See that? Let's do it again. Keeps moving, right? Cool. Y'all see how we did that? Are we sure? Yeah? Cool. Okay. Now we're going to need, so now we have a ball. We have this, we make ball moves. We haven't made collision physics. So the first part of Pong that makes it interesting is that every now and then it bounces off the wall, right? And then it goes in the other direction. So I'm going to be like, I'm going to just do something that I'm going to call const check wall collisions equals loop, loop, loop. I'm just going to be like, hey, at this point, when you do collision physics, I always draw everything out. Like, get really specific about this. So I'm going to draw this ball right here, right? This right here is, this right here, you'll notice that when we render a ball, we're actually rendering it's rendering an arc from the center of the arc. So it's not going to be from the top left, which is just something that I can show you, but believe me on this, this code is basically creating an arc and it's making it like this, right? And it's just drawing it around this circle, right? So this right here is going to be the ball's xy, right? And this right here is going to be tracked as ball.y minus ball.r. Because remember, y goes this way. We're going to have this one right here, ball.y plus ball.r. This is going to be ball.x plus ball.r. And I promise you, this will save, like, just having this drawing next to you whenever you're doing something with collision physics will save you a lot of insanity. Ball.x minus ball.r. Cool? So now, we need to check to see if the top of the box, if the ball hits the top at the top of the box. So let's go with ball.y minus ball.r is less than or equal to 0, right? Yes. And. Now at this point, we can just do ball.dy equals ball.dy times -1. We're just going to be like, hey, reverse direction if you hit the top. And I'm also going to do this. Okay, let's actually test that to make sure it works first. I'm going to send this ball going in the other direction. And let's just like set it up for optimal bouncy. What? Right, I didn't actually call this classic. Check wall collisions. Great. Boop. Cool. Now I'm going to just do that to the other side. When I find my code. There we go. So now I'm just going to be like, hey, ball.y plus ball.r is greater than or equal to, whoops, are greater than or equal to canvas height.
Minus ball height.
What's that?
Minus ball height.
Well, so we're just checking the bottom, right? So that's what the plus is for rather than the minus. So if we go here, if the ball's right here, that's when we want it to boop, right?
So the height is the bottom of it, right? That's what we did. Yeah.
Yep. Oh, there we go. Oh. You know what? Let's just do it this way. I really need to stop writing things on one line. Hey, if either of these things are true, let's reverse it.
Fancy code.
You do not want to strive for one-line code. Write your code out. I would like I could do like reverse ball y direction. I could make this a function. There's a lot of different ways to do this that don't involve making this really, really like this. But we now have it booping, right? We have booping off the top and the bottom, the way we want it to boop. So now comes the real pain in the ass of a part, which is to check to see if it needs to hit the paddle, right? Now there are only two times that I need to check to see if it's hitting the paddle. If it's past this line, or if it's past this line. Yeah? So I'm going to create two parts of this function right here. First part is say, hey, do we need to check a collision with the paddle? If so, then the second part is, hey, did it collide with the paddle? The first part, I'm just going to write in my regular index.js because it doesn't actually rely on the paddle. It relies on the canvas. It's only checking to see, hey, is it across this line? Is it across this line? It doesn't rely on the config for the canvas, but for the paddle, but that's it. It doesn't rely on actually the paddle's location. So I'm going to call this right here, const check paddle collisions equals. I'm going to add this down here so I don't have another one of those embarrassing moments. So I'm actually going to, I want to give myself something here. Nah, let's do it. First we need to check this line right here. If I'm writing an if statement so that we can be really explicit, because at this point I don't feel like doing fancy code and then messing it up here. If the left side of the ball.x minus ball.r, is less than or equal to this line right here, which is just config.canvas or .paddle width. Then paddle1.check collision. And now I'm just going to write this as a placeholder function. I'm going to just be like console log, this should check a collision at this point. And I'm just going to send this in that direction to see what's up. Great. Boom. As soon as it passed that line, it's checking collisions, right? Checking collisions on the y-axis. Now I'm going to now I need to write this really quick. I'm going to write this really quickly for the x-axis. We call this pal2.check collisions. Now for this one, we're doing canvas width minus paddle width. And we're doing it with the right side of the ball. All right, let's see if that works. I rushed that one. Nope. Let's chill. There we go. What? Oh, yeah. Greater than or equal to. Cool. So now, when it's passing these lines, we're setting it to the right paddle to check its collision. Okay? So here comes the part that I'm going to talk about a little bit. So we have, I'm going to just erase some space for us. We have a paddle. And you'll notice that I'm actually not going to have to write any conditional logic for these paddles to like say, are you on the left or right side? Because all we're doing is checking the y value for the right paddle. So all I have to do right here is a paddle. I want a situation where you can clip the ball. I want a situation where you can hit the ball dead on. I want a situation where you can clip it on the other side. And I want these situations to be false, right? I want these to be no-nos. Cool? So I'm actually describing a box here. Where the top value that I want to hit and the bottom value that I want to hit basically describe the part where is the top value above the bottom side of the ball? That's true. Or the bottom side of the paddle. Or sorry, is the top part of the ball above the bottom side of the paddle? This is true for all three of these. This is not true for this one. And is the bottom part of the ball above the top side of the paddle? That's true for all of these, not true for this. I'm gonna write down now, in our to-dos, right here. Over here. But is the top of the paddle above the bottom end of the ball? True for all of them. And is the bottom of the paddle below the top end of the ball? And this is what I do every time. I try to write this out in like as plain English as I can, and then I like really try to like make sure that I'm right on this. So when I say the top above, I actually mean less than or equal. If I say below, I mean greater than or equal to. Yeah? And we have the bottom end of the ball. So I'm gonna like flip this over here now, and we can begin coding this. Cool. So, is the top of the paddle, we can call the top of the paddle Y. If, well, let's just call this so Y is less than or equal to, at this point, we have a stat. For this one, we're going to be passing in ball. So we know about it. This is at Y, top of the paddle, greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to, the bottom part of the ball. Yeah? What? Yeah. So X at Y right here. Bottom line. So we got this, right? And whoops. let's now say bottom of the paddle, this dot y plus config dot paddle height is greater than or equal to ball dot y minus ball dot r, right here. Return true or false. Does everyone know double bang? I'm probably being overly explicit here, but I just don't want to like have any glitches.
What's
you-
double bang?
Basically, it says like, hey, either return true or false.
Okay.
One bang turn something to false if it's true, or turn something to true if it's false. Two bangs just returns whether it's true or false by returning the opposite of the first one. So at this point, this is probably a little much in terms of what we're doing here. Cool. We got true there. Do you see that?
Yep.
Boom. Cool. So I'm actually going to be like, I'm now going to do this a little bit more, less one line, because I'm not being obnoxious. Loop, loop. If this happens, and reverse direction. Yeah? Cool. And now let's call something called reverse direction. And I'm going to do this in the simple way, but this may cause errors depending on how we clip it. It might you may not be able to clip it as precisely, but if I do ball.dy equals -1 times ball.dy, I'm going to show you that ideally it works. Oh. What? What's up?
Default reverse direction?
No. Oh, first let's do this. And then did I save? Got checking. Cool, I might have done something ridiculous. Well. I'm just making sure that it's not something that I missed in my code. And yeah. Yeah, it's actually doing that. So oh, cool. Yeah. Awesome. There we go. There we are. We are very close to done right here. You can see this works, but now if I do this, it'll like reverse a whole bunch of times. We need to make a win condition, right? Cool? Do we have questions? Yes, Solomon, what's up?
Yeah, how come you didn't have to write reverse direction for the ball hitting the top of the canvas and the bottom?
We wrote something different. We had check wall correlations, and then I just wrote it here because I was being lazy.
So you could have, just theoretically, you could have used that same code to bounce off the paddle.
So when it's bouncing off the top, it's changing its y direction. When it's bouncing off the side, it's changing its x direction. So that's the reason why I'm making it two different pieces of code right here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now I'm going to actually take a second here. Do we know how we got to this point? What was that?
I mean, I'm really impressed. It's just been really fast.
Yeah. Cool. So let's talk about this really quickly. What was the most confusing part here? Anyone?
After you start with the derivatives.
Sorry, say again.
After you started with the derivatives and like changing the ball.
Okay. Yeah. So like in this case, like when it's changing in a positive towards a positive, it's going this way. When it's changing in a negative, the dx is negative, it's going this way. And that's just because we're going to be adding the negative value, right? So that's what we're doing here. I realize I've been going through this really quickly. I want to show you like how to just build a game, but I realize I don't really want to be like one of those Swedish YouTubers who's like, here's how we build the entirety of Snake in 5 minutes. So if you have questions, feel free to slow me down. But
Wait, now?
yeah, fair. Cool. So here we are. Now we just need a check win, right? So I'm going to make something that I'm just going to call check win. Come on. It gets mad at me for not defining something before I write it. So we have const check win equals cool. So we're going to have two different functions we want to call, right? I'm actually going to separate this into 3 steps, but basically I want to be, if these are the conditions where you win. Pedal 2 wins if the right side of the ball passes 0. Pedal 1 wins if the left side of the ball passes canvas width. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah? Cool. So let's do a conditional here. So ball.x plus ball.r is less than 0. Yeah? If the right side of the ball passes here, then win paddle 1. So basically I'm going to write this I'm going to write a 3-part function. First, I want a win function that resets the game, and then tells paddle 1 it wins. And then I'm going to have a paddle 1 win function that'll just increase its score. I'm going to have minus is greater than or equal to, right? Let's do less than or equal to and greater than or equal to. Config dot, or canvas.width is fine. And then win paddle 2. And then we're going to call this thing called win. Now, at the outset of the game, I created, of building this, I created this reset ball function. That should be pretty helpful right now, right? Reset ball. I'm going to just be like paddle.win. And then I'm going to create this little function right here. I'm going to first, at the outset of my paddle, I'm going to make this dot score equal to 0. And then whenever you win, I'm just going to be like win equals this dot score plus plus. Yeah? So everyone see the 3 things I said there? I'm going to check see if it wins, and if it wins, I'm going to call it, I'm going to reset the ball and call that paddle's win condition. And I'm just going to like really quickly we're gonna be like console log score or pedal1.score. Cool. This is going to go back and forth. Now it's 0-1, now it's 0-2, now it's 0-3. We're scoring. Now it should be 1-4 in a sec. There we go. And you saw that glitch, and that was the glitch I was warning everyone about. We're not going to have to worry about that right now. But now we just have to like write this little scoreboard, and then we're done. So, HTML canvas render text. We could make it an H1 at the top of the game, but why would we? We've already got this like cool canvas. So we've got this right here, and this is just some very helpful code for, hey, context. Your font's now 30-point Arial, right? Or Comic Sans, or something like that. And then, hey, this X position and this Y position, I want you to write the words hello world for us. Cool? It's still like MS Paint, where you describe your font color, your font thing, and then you just begin painting. So I'm going to just put this in our render function for the pedal. I'm going to make this .score. And now this isn't going to work immediately because they're going to be laying on top of each other. But yeah, you're seeing how it's counting right here? Now I just need to choose where it goes, right? So right now, we've got this X position for us, right? I'm just going to be like canvas the width over 2 plus, and then I'm just going to like space them out a little bit. 200 times this, or 200 times this dot direction. I think that should work. Let's take a look.
Nice.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Everyone see what I just did there? That one was like tricky and too much of a speed run. But basically I'm just like, hey, put this in the middle, and then we're also gonna like space out from the middle at 200. Like, and then if it's on the left side, it should be 200 to the left of it. If it's on the right side, it should be 200 to the right of it. That makes sense? And at this point, we have Pong.
Because the direction is 1 or -1, so that's
Yeah. And you're noticing this clipping was the glitch I was bringing up, but cool. There's one other thing we can do to make this more like Pong, where we can make it slice. I feel like it is now currently 332. Hell yes. Great. Yep.
I've been waiting to play that.
Cool. So if people want to see the slice, I can show the slice. If everyone's tired, we can end it here. How's everyone feeling?
What is the slice?
Basically, when you play Pong, if you hit the ball here, it launches off in this direction. If you hit the ball here, it launches off in this direction. But first, before we do that, before we even consider doing that, questions.
Alright.
Yo.
Okay, Nikki, you pass one through.
Yeah, this did not take me an hour and a half the first time. This took me way longer. I just wanted to like show, like, hey, here's how a render function works. Here's how like organized code in your game works. Because when I did my Mod 3 project, our game was a complete mess that I still can't refactor. So like I've tried twice and it's just completely broken. So I just wanted to like kind of show like a couple of my learnings here. But I realized that this was a fast lecture. You are not expected to code this quickly and with this much code organization. I just kind of wanted to be like, hey, here's some best practices, much like one of those Swedish YouTubers. Cool?
If you all want to stay in the room and work here, so it's quieter here, you're more than welcome to.
Play?
If you want to work outside, that's also welcome.
No one's gonna lose.
You can turn up the speed if you want.
I got a head start though, so I should be good.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Cool. All right. I should probably stop recording real quick.